Hello and welcome to Engineering Insights. Today we're joined by Sebastian Sheppard, the engineering manager at Alpine Formula One team. Hi, how are you doing today?
Very good, thank you, Aslan.
Mhm.
Thanks for the invite. Very,
Thank you for
very glad to
coming.
be here.
So let's start off with your early career in the Navy. Why did you choose to start off there?
As we were talking just early on, for your listeners, I'm currently in Chile, which is where I grew up. Um, and uh, whilst I was here in Chile, my father was sort of involved in various defense side of things, and I got the opportunity to be in southern Chile doing expeditions with a load of different people from the armed forces, both the UK and the US armed forces, and something that started off as a vague interest turned into something that was quite an option, a possibility. At the time, I didn't think that somebody who'd grown up, even as an expat who'd grown up in Chile, would be eligible, let alone be prepared enough to be able to go into the armed forces. But I was encouraged by these people I met, and I applied. And after a series of sort of fortunate events and also quite a lot of interviews, I was accepted to go and do flying training in the Fleet Air Arm. What started off as a vague sort of thing, I just went, okay, well, I'll give it a go. You never know, and it's like everything, a door opens, and if you're brave enough to walk through it, other doors open.
Mhm. Well, you were doing flying training, so why the Navy then over something like the RAF?
Well, the one of the difficulties of having grown up in Chile is that to join the armed forces in the
Mhm.
UK as for officer training, you have to have a residency requirement, which generally means that you have to have lived in England for about 5 years before the application date. And in the case of the Air Force, they basically said, no, we're not interested. We got plenty of candidates. The Army and the Navy said, look, you can live for 2 years in England before you apply. And because of these expeditions I was doing in southern Chile with an organization called Operation Rally back in the day, which was happened to be the patron. Our patron was the then Prince of Wales, currently King Charles, and so because my application went through, um, the chairman at the time of the organization was an ex-admiral, and he made a couple of inquiries. And basically, the person who decided at the time whether they could waive this 2 year requirement was the prime minister or the secretary of state for defense. It actually went that high,
Oh.
and somehow that was waived, and I was allowed to go and apply. Like by that time, by that stage, you apply with everybody else.
Mhm.
So that's so I and because it was Army and Navy, and I ended up basically deciding that it was going to be Navy because they were first of all they were the first ones to invite me to an interview, and secondly it sounded like much more fun flying military helicopters from ships.
Mhm.
Although it's a close run thing, I think.
I mean, in the military, there's a lot of focus on, styles of leadership and how to manage a lot of teams. Is there anything that you learn in the military that still kind of applies?
Yeah, and absolutely. There's a very, very intense training, both theoretical and practical, on leadership exercises. You're constantly doing leadership exercises in the field or in different settings and so on. So right from the moment go, especially as in officer training, you are sort of told that you have to lead people and things and situations and so on. So you kind of learn, I suppose, to confront situations that you don't know anything about, and and that has really set me up very well for the future. For life when you're confronted with something, instead of panicking or just giving
Mm.
up, you say like, well, okay, this is just an unknown. We're going to try this, and if that doesn't work, we'll try that and this and that. But at the same time, you're also taught that how to manage teams. And one of the things I've found out, that especially in the last 30 years, I suppose, is that when working with highly technical people who
Mm.
are generally very good at, and they want to just do technical things, but they don't really want to do the whole team thing, or not necessarily interact so much, but you learn how to sort of bring people together, make the best out of people, and not just sort of just give up on certain individuals because they think a different way. Just trying to bring the best out of people in
Mm.
teams, and also just give them a reason and a motivation and a purpose in what you're doing, what you happen to be doing at that time. But more than anything, it's about the leadership of being able to confront situations,
Mhm.
and that's a nice bit of it.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds really essential for project management and stuff like that, which you have been doing throughout your career. Why did you then switch from, flying helicopters to going into project management logistics?
So I spent 8 very good years in the Royal Navy flying helicopters, and in the meantime, I was because I spoke Spanish, I was having to do lots of different sort of jobs around the world, which involved
Mm.
speaking Spanish. A lot of them were quite a lot of fun. In fact, I came to Chile once and ended up working very closely with the Chilean Navy, and then worked very closely with the Spanish Navy, and then eventually I sort of decided, right, uh, it was two options. Either I went to flying the airlines, which most of my friends did, or flying helicopters for the police or the ambulance service or whatever. Or I went off and in my case, I decided that I've had so much fun flying and so many different areas and places that I thought, I think the flying will never get any better than this. So
Mhm.
therefore, there's no point trying to sort of, flog that horse. And the thought to me of flying an airline was not particularly appealing.
Mhm.
So it goes from flying
Mhm.
the equivalent of a race car around very low around different parts of the world and landing on ships to driving a bus. I
Yeah.
thought that wouldn't be particularly motivating for me. So I decided to get an education and then so I ended up in Edinburgh University doing an MBA. Strange enough, without an initial degree, which kind of flummoxed me a little bit. But they said that because of the training I'd done in the Navy, I could skip the whole degree thing,
Mhm.
which meant that I had to turn 3 years of undergraduate sort of experience with
Yeah.
all that brings, that all the parties and having fun to just 1 year's worth of very intense masters, which is fine. And then after that, I just sort of started dipping my toe into various places. I ended up in defence, working for a company called Lockheed Martin down in Cornwall, and and in the armed forces, one thing that as part of your training is that you tend to be very good at managing situations, people, programs, projects, and so on quite naturally. So that was a very natural evolution for me, and I've been doing that sort of without realizing for ever since I was about 17.
Mm.
With these expeditions I was talking about in southern Chile, and that sort of went from that to various other project management jobs and more senior roles in big programs, and then eventually, yeah, then it turned into various other opportunities.
Mhm. I've spoken to someone else previously who did work in Lockheed Martin as well, and they were saying that they felt that the pace of development is a lot slower than in other commercial companies. Did you feel that as a project manager that it was different?
Um, yes, especially seeing as my current role is very very fast. I mean, I've been, I suppose, lucky that I've seen in my career, I've seen quite a lot of, the whole diverse, well, the whole spectrum really of incredibly fast F1 down to sort of glacial pace in nuclear, and with
Mhm.
everything in between, like defense and aerospace and cars, trains, planes, automobiles, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, defense and aerospace, especially aerospace, has to be slow, but for a reason. There's the last thing you want to do is get
Yeah.
onto an airplane to go to Malaga and think that and be nervous about the fact that this thing is going to fall out of the sky. So
Yeah.
therefore, the pace of everything that's done is done very carefully, and by the time you jump on an airplane, it is literally the safest mode of transport in the world.
Mhm.
Much safer than crossing the street, much safer than taking the bus, which is statistically true. And there's a reason for that. That every single step of the way, everything's checked. So, for example, when there is an aircraft accident, they will look at everything. From
Mhm.
what the pilots were eating for the previous 3 weeks, to the mine from where the metal of the aeroplane, or maybe the bit that failed on the aircraft, if that was the case, from the mine where it was extracted. And there
Oh.
has to be a whole sort of line of quality control and checks to make sure that everything is correct, and
Mhm.
so that you can guarantee that the quality of things which the engineering will put together, and make sure that as long as the quality of all these parts is correct, then the failure rate of this should be zero, or should be within a window that they will guarantee.
Yeah.
And so everything is about safety, and so you have spectrums of safety. Obviously in F1, it's all prototypes, because there's only like one guy driving around in a
Mm.
in a closed circuit, to nuclear, which is obviously that's the last place where you want things to
Yeah.
go whiz
Mhm.
bang, and that is even more sort of stringent. Everything is absolutely super slow, but for a reason. The
Mhm.
technologies, it will increment, but very, very slowly.
Safety does seem like a really big aspect of all the project management in, engineering. Would you say that that's the biggest challenge you have to face as a project manager?
No, the biggest challenge you have in project management is really getting things to happen,
Mm.
and and it's about understanding the complexity of what you're trying to do. It could be anything from a little sort of project in your little local community project, where you have to bring people together, and materials and funding, and do a little bit of marketing to tell the community about what's going on, to something very big, which is like building half an aircraft or something like that. But it tends to be a lot about communicating, making sure that everybody understands what's going on, setting the pace, and making sure people understand what is the objective of what they're trying to do, getting people together and on board and motivated with a purpose of what they're trying to do. In a lot of cases, I've seen that projects are badly managed because people tend to sort of just sit down and fill in
Mhm.
forms and sort of write emails, whereas I tend to find, and this is a very good lesson that an old boss of mine gave me. He said that if you can develop the skill to be able to go and walk the floor and talk to the people who actually do the job, i.e., the ground floor,
Mm.
they will get you to understand the problems of what's going on around you, which your managers might not be able to tell you, or people will not understand at a certain level. And that is a very good sort of indicator of being able to. So if you were to develop any kind of skill, that's a skill that you want to develop, is being able to
Mm.
talk to everybody, because once you can talk to and communicate to everybody without being condescending, or turning up like I'm the boss, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just being natural, being nice, be having a normal conversation, because people will want to tell you, and people want to fix things, and if they feel that people upstairs are listening, then they'll sort of give you the time of day.
Mm.
So for skills, I would say that that's probably the most important one. And then it's all about communication. Yeah, trying to get people to do what they're supposed to do at the right time in order to hit a target.
Bringing people together and then, making them motivated for that goal. It does sound very important. Yeah. Um, well,
Yeah.
you talked about how, you need to be able to speak the language, I guess, of people working on the technical side. Was that difficult for you as someone on the business side who then moved into engineering?
Um, no. Well, yeah, yes and no. There's always naturally people tend to people are not in a group of people, you'll always find the one that's more it's easier to talk to, and so on. But mostly people tend to be quite shy, and people tend to not want to go out of their way to sort of just have a chat with others. But it's something that you have to develop. You have to.
Mhm.
One thing I always try and tell certainly people who work for me is that you always have to try and be comfortable being uncomfortable. And what do I mean by that? That the minute that you become comfortable in what you're doing in your environment, means that you've mastered what you're doing. That you don't have many challenges left. So you want to try and be feel comfortable always giving yourself a challenge
Mm.
and so on. And part of that is to be able to talk to anybody, and that
Yeah.
and that because literally that will open just about any door. And and this particular thing came from an old boss of mine that I was mentioning early on, who started off as an electrician, just a bog standard electrician in a company in those days. It was called British Aerospace, and he ended up being the boss of uh, the helicopter part of Leonardo, the big defense company
Well,
in the UK. And he used to, I mean, big boss, big, huge thousands of people in this factory in Yeovil, and he basically would go down and as the top boss, he would literally go down and have cups of tea with the guys on the shop floor.
mhm.
Literally, every day he'd go down and have a little breakfast with all of them.
Yeah.
Nothing fancy, just a cup of tea. Sit down on a plastic stool, whatever. And he said that within a week he understood the problems of the company better than his own managers.
Well,
And he said all it took was,
yeah.
5 or 6 cups of tea, have a chat with people, connect with people, ask them what they what their problems were, and people would open up.
Mm.
So that's a really good trait to have.
Well, let's move back to then your whole career journey. Why did you choose to move from aerospace to F1 then?
That was a very sort of fortunate event really that happened. So I was in Spain at the time. We decided to come back to the UK,
Hmm.
and out of the blue, I got approached by a technical partner an F1 team called Lotus F1 that happened to be working with this F1 team, and they'd been asked to find somebody to look after the development of a new simulator, a new car
Hmm.
simulator. And seeing as I'd already had experience in military simulators
Yeah.
and project management and so on, they sort of said, look, you might be the right person. It just sort of happened to be that we were going back to England, so everything aligned. And when so I got a telephone interview, and I was on the phone to the technical director of in those days Lotus F1. He's now in Cadillac
Hmm.
F1. But I said to him, I said, straight off the bat, I said, look, you do realize that I'm not technical and I haven't got a clue how a car works, but I'm reasonably good at making things happen. He thought this was quite funny, because it was kind of like, well, that's exactly what we need. It's not somebody who's technical, but somebody who can get this thing across the line.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so that's where I started, and I did that for about a year and a half. Then he asked me to do a different project, so I ended up doing quite a lot of strategic projects for in those days Lotus F1. And at that point, I decided, right, I need to go off and with the company that I was working for, this engineering consultancy that became Capgemini eventually. I decided to just look. I need to go off and do some other things. And
Hmm.
over the preceding the years, I ended up doing lots of other things. So I ended up working in sort of all sorts of industries like railways, cars, telecoms,
Hmm.
nuclear, data analytics, cybersecurity, and I can't remember a couple of others.
Yeah.
And yeah, and eventually in 2018, my old boss calls me back up and says, "Look, so we've got a bit of an issue. We've got an amazing sort of regrowth of the team, but we can't seem to be able to retain anybody." And and so he said, "Look, we want you to come over and have a look at this and take care of the engineering team and basically kind of make it happen, type thing."
Hmm.
So that's how it came about, and that's basically what I've been doing for the last 6.5 years.
So, why did you say you were leaving F1 now?
So no, it's mainly because after 6 years, I've done everything I wanted to do,
Hmm.
and it's really sort of it's a very intense industry, so it's fairly 24/7, and I think I could do with a break really
Hmm.
from this, and I thought also at the same time that what I've learned not only in F1 but in previous challenges I've had, I wanted to sort of take a little bit of time and be able to um, talk to people in universities and schools and stuff
Hmm.
like that, and just
Yeah.
just just to share my knowledge and experience with if it's of any help to anyone.
Mhm. Well, looking as a reflection of your time in F1 then, or with Alpine, what would you say the proudest moments are with the team?
I think there's a variety of them. I mean, it's not only when you do the wins or the the podiums and so on, because that's the culmination of what you want to do. That's the purpose of why you're there. But to me, the proudest moment is to be able to see to work with young people who are very very bright. Have worked very hard to be where they are in F1, but also to be able to help them shape their careers and sort of motivate them and give them a structure where they understand that they can work comfortably, happily, turn up to the office, being happy
Mhm.
at what they're doing with a purpose, and and that they can do their best work without having to sort of worry about do I need to go find myself a new job or having to hit
Mhm.
LinkedIn or anything like that. That basically you create a team that is solely focused on the task at hand, and without any kind of politics, or as little politics as possible, without any kind of too much noise on the sort of the on the on the personal front,
Mhm.
and just really so that people can support each other. Anything elite like F1. It's very 24/7, and people sort of end up being putting everything they have into it.
Mhm.
And so, if you can have a kind of like a very good team, family, close atmosphere where people are looking out for each other, then you can then start seeing that somebody's flagging a little bit, and then you can say, right, I think this person is burning out a little bit. Pull them off from the front line a little bit, and then get them to recoup their energy, and then when they're ready, bring them back to the front. It's those kind of things that it was nice to be able
Mhm.
to influence and be part of.
That sounds, yeah, it sounds like a big aspect of project management, knowing your team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in the my recent case, I was leading. I was the engineering manager of the team, so it was much. It was much bigger than sort of my previous roles in project management. This was kind of like being able to shape the structure around a very very intense, very sort of high performing elite group of engineers to be able to create these amazing racing cars in an
Mhm.
atmosphere which is very very uh, nice. I would say.
Mhm. Well, I've just got the notification that I'm about to run out of time. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast. Just hearing about your journey, it's been really insightful. So thank you for that.
Fantastic, Aslan. Thanks very much for the invite, and good luck to everybody out there.
Mhm.